where we remember and pay tribute and show respect to those that didn't make it home. We also celebrate our resilience that we're still here, for those of us that are still walking Mother Earth.
It's been decades, and Ellen DeRocher still carries the pain.
We were beaten and raped and abused every day at the residential school.
DeRocher attended St. Phillips Residential School at Keeseekoose First Nation. She survived, but others didn't.
kwe ni gagi smo ke maga biziguyan. Ni gagi smo we tewe kan ka kaptient kana ka moat. So agi ma kana ma venis wat. Ikitone no. Ma kwe gata kapit. Ma so we ki piu teme na nek ma so ka piu. Piu nis ka wat. Agi gina ma kan sattegen skuna kan ma ga pisa ek. Gina kome gom. Oni got this into Queen come any ta. Eu take te Gagim. Gagi sonat into Benochi. So go where gum comment. Money in guys in quesiment. No, sir. Nipwa. Good queen into men. So get a winter's nickel gates my way to be school can I get water being tunk. Money and gay go on task sin. Hardest way gay go to Gagi mat come against what way in a gee knock. Morgan in a guy. Gone no cartom what. Reason I got. Gay Kate to give up and tan gay go. Want to see his egg is a sea. Uske uti saunung, skunegan, we pakke, we naga, we match to what ke go. Wait us got us into man no come. Jones are gonna be goes young and ke utini gan, to mean name to me. We ke go. We naga to wins again, so we te when. Ha ni pa, you naga to win, amen, we came out, take my guy. Skagagi gittet. Ni på det isn't tamen. Where did it go out time? Minoke ko heutini gan menos seven. Langan at the swake ko iti. How you take a guy in questionment, we when it took. Ma pesa. Ni in agato entan. Maga majinta where Shianis snapek. What's me good talk? Is it to give up monias? Long at the swake konum. Where Rabziquian. We in a bus send them menogeko. How many cake at one?
Joining me in our Saskatoon studio is Judy Pelly. Judy is a residential school survivor, and she also has real-world experience in turning ideas into action and success. Hi, Judy.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm great.
Yeah.
Tell us, to begin with, a little bit about your residential school experience, Judy.
Okay. Well, I'm actually I was born and raised on Cody First Nation. We had a St. Phillips residential school that we all went to. I was a day scholar, but I was also, we were abused as just as much, I think, but my siblings and were in residential, like residents at the St. Phillips School. We experienced, I think, just as much, or a lot of the physical and mental and emotional, damage as a family, and I think intergenerational trauma has really affected my family. My mother was a survivor. She was very much abused in those years when she was in the same school, St. Phillips School. She was damaged, and of course, with that came a lot of dysfunctions within, I guess, alcoholism was very prevalent. My grandparents, as a matter of fact, were also battled that, as I have. It's intergenerational, and of course affected my own children. And we're now doing, like, we do what we with the Truth and Reconciliation and talking about helping one another, we're able to bring those really truths that have never been told in public have come to life, and I'm so happy that I'm alive at this time. I sometimes wish my mother would have been here and to listen to some of the what our people are doing in terms of bringing forth the truth as it happened in residential schools, and making the public aware of why a lot of things have happened. I have one of my colleagues I work with, a knowledge keeper that tells his story, and what he does is he tells his story to various groups, and recently it was to some medical doctors or doctors that have specialized doctors. He told his story, and and of course he tells this story in from the time he was a child, and where he grew up in safety and of his home, and was raised by grandparents out in the bushes, and how they were happy, and then how his life changed totally when he was 6 years old, and then how and then he tells this story to groups across Saskatchewan as part of Truth and Reconciliation. Our CEO of Saskatoon Health Region had committed to the calls to action, and make the employees and people more culturally to learn more about what happened, and to be able to put into context some of the reasons why Indigenous peoples are overrepresented in the health sector. And as Gilbert tells his story, when he was talking to the doctors, some of them were crying, and some of them came up to him and said, a lot of us were born and raised in rural Saskatchewan, had never had any interaction really with Indigenous peoples, and then became doctors, and then now, of course, the overrepresentation of Indigenous peoples, they're having to treat a lot of, because of the lifestyles and because of intergenerational trauma and impacts, and what that has done, destroyed a peoples, and I see this every day, and the doctors can now understand, like they were crying, and some of them and saying, oh, now finally I know why, because that they people just generalize, they just, they don't get to the core issue of what's happening.
You do this work as an elder with the Saskatoon Health Region and some other groups as well to help with that understanding. Why is it that sharing the stories is so key to helping those who never experienced it understand that emotional impact and the social impact, and why there's been so much destruction through the generations because of the residential school system? Why is it so important to share stories?
Well, you begin to understand, you begin to get an appreciation of why it happened. Like people didn't just go out and decide that this is the lifestyle they're going to live. There's a reason for everything, and then I think understanding that intergenerational trauma, intergenerational the abuses that happen in Indian residential schools needs to be acknowledged. The truths need to be heard, and then that's when you start to gain an understanding, because the language, the culture, like a child being taken away at 6 years old and forcibly taken away and stripped of everything they've ever had, and they have no identity, and then they get abused, really horrendously abused in some cases, and then grow up as adults, and then also become sometimes perpetrators, and then they try to hide these ugly feelings. Myself, I'm a survivor, and my own personal experiences, I drank to forget. To forget some of the things, because you have no spirit. Everything's been stripped away from you, and you have no self-worth, and you start to hide those things through alcohol, sometimes drugs, and all that.
Now, a search using ground-penetrating radar has found evidence of 54 potential graves in the community, a dozen at the site of St. Phillips, and 42 connected to the Fort Pelly Residential School.
Hundreds of people are collaborating in Saskatoon this week at a conference focused on Aboriginal engagement. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action are at the foundation of what's happening between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal participants at this conference.
To welcome you to this territory is a young man that I've seen grow up. I was a good friend of his father, and still good friends with his family. And for those that remember the late Spuddy Kitchemonia, he was not only a good man, a leader of this community, but also a legendary hockey player. And I distinctly remember number 20 when I was a little guy growing up and watching him play. And as a result, I got to meet his son, who I'm very proud of also, to see him grow up here in the community. And today to be your leader, I'd like to call him up, Chief Lee Kitchemonia, to make welcoming remarks on behalf of the nation.
Thank you. Thank you for that very kind introduction, Mr. Arkan. I'd like to start off this morning by thanking the elders and thanking the singers for the songs that they sing for us today. Very important that we start the day off in a good way. We had our pipe ceremony this morning. It was a very beautiful one. We prayed for good things to happen today. Now, the reason why we're here today is it's a very solemn day, but at the same time, gives us closure, and it also opens up the door for more questions. What happened? What really happened? Knowing that we had unmarked graves in our community, in our common areas that we drive every day, that we walk every day, we pass by them, never realizing that there was graves. Somebody has to be held accountable for it. And that's the question that I have, is who's going to be accountable for this? You know, I've lived in this community my entire life. I've heard the stories from my dad, my late father, Leonard Ketchamonia. You know, I've heard them from my mom as well too. My mom Stella, she's sitting here with me today. I have my granddaughter here with me today, and my youngest daughter. They're the ones that are giving me strength. I think about all those children that went to school. You know, and that's what it really boils down to. Is seeing your kid leave your house in the morning time, not realizing that you'll never ever see your child again for as long as you live, not knowing any answers to where those children are gone. All you know is that they're gone to school and they've never returned. I can't imagine what those parents and grandparents would have felt like. All I know is that it must have been a hurt that nobody could ever imagine. So we're here today to acknowledge what happened. You know, people have asked me in the last couple of months, when we find something, is that going to be the end of it? I think all this has done is it's opened up the door for more questions. Are there more graves out there? We don't know that. We got caught up in the snow, so the numbers that we have here today are the numbers we're presenting, but it also opens up the door for more questions. It's going to be a very tough time for our community, knowing that we had unmarked graves in our community, in our common areas that we drive every day, that we walk every day. We passed by them, never realizing that there was graves there. And that's got to be the most hurtful part, is the way they were hidden. Who does that? Somebody has to be held accountable for it. And that's the question that I have, is who's going to be accountable for this? You know, these are not just instances where a principal or a teacher is disciplined. You know, these could potentially be, you know, murdered children, hidden. We don't know any of these answers, so we need to fight for these records to see what happened, to see who these graves belong to. You know, they could be our aunts, our uncles, our grandfathers, or things like that. You know, they're vanished just off the face of this earth, never to be seen again. That's the hardest part. These next few months, it's going to be a very difficult time for our community to start healing. I don't know if we'll ever get closure. We're going to pray for closure. I pray for closure every day, but I don't know if I'll ever see it in my lifetime. Maybe in my children's lifetime, my grandchildren's lifetime, they'll find out what really happened. But the further away we get from the actual event, you know, those facts, they seem to be blurred the further we go.
The next speaker is the project manager of what's transpired here, with the findings that are going to be revealed this morning. But he's also a past leader of your community. He's a lifelong friend of mine. We have shared many rough experiences and we've shared many good experiences. About 15 years ago, the first leader to reveal the abuses that he had suffered in residential school was then National Chief Phil Fontaine. It wasn't very long after that the FSIN Chiefs Assembly gathered in Saskatoon. And the person who had the strength at that time to reveal. And let's think about it. Let's go back that 15 years. None of us wanted to talk about it. We were all part of Canada's darkest secret. And the first leader in Saskatchewan to reveal what he had experienced in terms of physical, psychological, emotional, and sexual abuse was this man. And I'm proud to call him my friend. He's a project manager of this. And I'd like him to give his report. My friend, Ted Keeseekoose.
Wait, that's my own going in his book. Kina. Kinis na pek. Kwebak, ninimak. Tu ninimak. Tu kwebak. Zugogi na kina piutek. Ma pizza wat. Apsinakta. Niwe anisna petroen gamino gozimen. Apsini po mine gozimen. Niwe paginanik. Onaknigewin. Zumina gigi kwewin. Uzich gewdinan. Niwe anis kai kitwat me osa chinisna pek. Zugige tambiyaginanik. Niwe pimatisiwin. I want to share with you to our community, to our people, to our country, and to the world. We as Indian people were given something very special. We were given a language, a culture, traditions, and ceremonies. Through the creation story of our elders of long ago. We have the oral history within our community. We have the oral history direction that is given to us from stories from long ago. And it's time to release the story of us as individuals, our families, and our community. I want to first of all acknowledge each of you that are here today, who come here to honor us. I want to acknowledge all of you that are here to show your respect to our community. I want to express my gratitude to the Keeseekoose survivors and our knowledge keepers, our churches, the Catholics, the Christians, the Anglicans within our community that have guided us within this process. I want to recognize those that have done the ceremonies and the prayers, our elders, our pastors within our community. Without their work, we would have the strength to move the work forward. I know we are also helped by the ancestors on the other side in guiding us through the process we went through. I want to recognize our lodge holders. All the elders made their contribution. And we have Elder Cuthbert Gishane, Stella Kitchemonia, Ted Stronkwell, and Sarah Janile. And about 25 other women elders in our community and men in our community. Keeseekoose, Key, and Cody First Nation membership are all part of our extended family, and we welcome them here today because a lot of those students from those two communities beside us attended the St. Phillips Residential School and the Fort Pelly Residential School. I want to acknowledge our singers for the songs and the elders that led the pipe ceremony this morning so we can proceed in a very positive, good way here today. The songs, the ceremonies, and prayers keep us connected to the Creator and to the land. I want to express my gratitude to our political leadership, our council members, for the confidence they put in us as survivors and the elders. Our chief has recognized that healing is not a political event. The work that has been done within our community, it's not politics. It's a human issue. Like the chief said, it has to be dealt with. And like the news that there were 215 grave sites in British Columbia, triggered all survivors across this country. We knew that we had to go through the same process. And we did, and it was hard. It wasn't easy. As you read our media release, Keeseekoose, we had 2 residential schools. The historical record of Keeseekoose, the oral tradition, includes what survivors directly experienced. What survivors saw, what survivors heard regarding the activities at the Fort Pelly and St. Phillips Residential School. These stories have been part of our truth-telling for the last 125 years. We all knew that we would find grave sites. These stories of abuse have been shared in testimony to the independent assessment process and the Truth and Reconciliation hearings across this country. I want to share with you, although the information regarding the missing usually fell on deaf ears, it was not that they could not hear, but they did not believe our survivors. Many Canadians still cannot believe that a human being could treat another human being, especially a child, like the way we were treated. Many in the churches could not believe that those committed to God could treat children that way. I have shared my abuse story publicly, and I can tell you firsthand that these things happened to myself and every member of my family and many families in our communities, surrounding communities. Today, we are announcing that there were 54 hits. 54 hits. Cassandra, if you want to unveil the orange cover of proof of our hits. As you can see on the flagged wall maps, 42 were found on the Fort Pelly site, and 12 were found at St. Phillips. The locations for scanning were identified by survivors and knowledge keepers from oral history. The ground penetrating radar simply validated our oral history. Keeseekoose survivors and families want closure as reclamation re-traumatizes our families. Every time a missing and murdered woman or a girl is identified, it is a reminder of the loss of one of our loved ones. Every announcement of residential schools, residential grave sites, re-traumatizes us survivors and our families and our communities. Survivors want closure and healing. But we also know we need to share our story. There are needs to be done, like truth-telling. We need to support our family members on their journey to the other side. In our language, truth is very important. Tepwewin. It's all about truth-telling. Within our ceremonies, we do not have a president. We don't have resolutions. We don't have motions. There is equality within our ceremonies. And if anything is going to carry us as we move forward, it's going to be truth-telling and conciliation. Not reconciliation, but conciliation. We have reached out to the NCTR. We've reached out to the Archdiocese. The Bishop, Don Bowden, is here as partners. Because victims and perpetrators need to heal if we are going to take a step closer to closure. Forgiveness is a hard thing to do, my friends, but it is a powerful because it empowers. And as a survivor, I am the only person that can forgive. It is a choice I make. You are acknowledging the pain of each survivor and family member, but you are also acknowledging the hope we have to heal. There are more of our children in foster care than there were in residential school today. Colonization is holding our families, our communities back. And there has to be a movement to destroy the Indian Act that controls our people. As a reference, truth telling is the first step, which I mentioned. Everyone has truth to tell. They have it in them. And every survivor has value to offer to the process. This reclamation project, it was guided by the survivors and knowledge keepers. Our people led with ceremonies, fasting and prayers. We taught the culture, we teach the culture, and we're still learning. Elders have directed that we need to use traditional teachings. We need to be humble. We need to forgive, but never, never forget. We need to love those that have caused us great harm. Forgiveness is an act of love. We need conciliation, my friends. Our trauma was not created by our people. Outsiders brought this pain, and most would say with good intentions. We have waited for healing from the outside, but we know it will only happen inside ourselves and inside our communities and within our families. And that's a choice we as First Nations people from the Keeseekoose have to deal with.
Our national chief, the first woman chief in the history of our national organization, Roseanne Archibald.
Roseanne Archibald, I want to acknowledge the survivors who are joining in person, and all of the survivors who are watching online, all of the intergenerational trauma survivors as well, of which I am one. Both of my parents and many of my older siblings attended what I call the institutions of assimilation and genocide. And I also want to share that Dr. Pam Toulouse, who is an Anishinaabe scholar, said that 100% of First Nations people suffer from intergenerational trauma, 100%. And it's a result of colonialism. However, the majority comes from these institutions. And I want to say that there are children who never made it home, particularly the 54 little ones that we are holding space for today. They are among the thousands of our little ones who didn't make it home. These institutions, I don't call them schools anymore. I did attend schools in municipalities across Ontario, and not one of those schools had unmarked graves with children in them, not one. And so these residential institutions of assimilation and genocide tore apart our families. They tore at the very social fabric of our communities and our nations. And when they did not return home, that left such a deep wound for families. So we're talking about up to 54 families that were impacted by these little ones not returning home. And that's what we have to talk about every time we make a recovery, is we have to help people understand that these institutions had a specific purpose. And it wasn't a benevolent one. It wasn't with good intentions. It was an attempt to remove our language, our cultures, our family connections. And it is what we're seeing in terms of fallout across the nations we have in Canada, or Turtle Island, I prefer to say, are the result of this ongoing colonial process, of which these institutions were a big part. And so I did hear a couple of the speakers say that they knew about this. We always knew what was happening in these institutions. And one of the survivors said, we just weren't believed. And so when we make these recoveries, that's proof. That's long overdue proof that genocide has occurred in Canada. And what's really difficult about this is that the recovery of our children is just beginning. We are at the beginning of over 130 institutions across Canada. And I want to tell all the First Nations in Saskatchewan and across Turtle Island that as National Chief, I stand with you as you work to bring these little ones home, identifying them, giving them names, giving them proper ceremony. These are things that we need to do. And we also have to hold the governments to account, the government of Canada particularly, and the churches. This is the shared history of this country. This is the truth. And that is what I feel is coming into the light is the truth of Canada. Canada is not a friendly, just, and fair society. We're seeing this as we move along, not only back then, but today. We're seeing evidence of the injustice and inequality, the way our people are treated, for example, in the protests that are happening right now, versus how non-Indigenous people are treated. The myth of Canada, I heard somebody else say that, has to be rewritten. And it can only be rewritten if we take a journey together. And that journey has to be a healing journey, and a healing journey that I'm calling the healing path forward. And the healing path forward is actually, number one, we have to acknowledge that there has to be truth before reconciliation. That's one of the main tenets. The other part of the healing path forward is not about just saying, okay, we're going to leave this behind now. No. The healing path forward is about accountability. If these were 54 non-Indigenous white children, the RCMP and other authorities would descend upon these sites and begin investigations. These are crime scenes. That's what they are. You don't bury a child without a proper ceremony. You certainly don't bury them in secret. Every single government and person in Canada has the responsibility to influence meaningful and positive change in order for us to move forward. We have to talk about our true shared history and commit to doing better as a country. Sorry, I'm in the city. Let's also talk about where we need to go as a country to heal the wounds created by genocide on our people through our children and families. Let's talk about how the systems and approaches led to residential institution that remain today entrenched in our systems, designed to hold our people back. I've heard someone say the Indian Act. Most of all, let's talk about the healing path forward as a people and all across Turtle Islands. It's time for healing. So Ninanaskawin for inviting me. Ninanaskawin in my language means I'm grateful, I am thankful, I thank you, and Keeseekoose, which means I love you.
And today, I have the great honor of introducing our first response. And it comes from one of our own people, who's a lieutenant governor of Saskatchewan, representing our relationship with the Crown and our treaty relationship. He is also a fellow residential school survivor. And when the invitations went out for this historic event today, the first one went to him, and the first one to respond was him. And I'm greatly honored today to call him up and recognize his wonderful wife, Donna, Lieutenant Governor of Saskatchewan, one of our very own, and I'm very proud of him. Let's give him a nice Keeseekoose welcome, Mr. Lieutenant Governor Russell Marasti.
No ako makantik, tuk timitik. Kitieg. Uniganiog. Ugimahan. Uskag me no tarapitik. Kida mo tarapi mamopig. Kita tamaskat na rakidonot gagisagak. No nas ko mami na Ted gagi piwi sama guak ni digo dona tapi tap metaganot. Tanto tamagia tapi toa hawawi so go gitia ganot ska pigiskuitsik. Nistan na nas ko mo ni gimi digo yan the pigiskuin ni doiwen piwit no hotsi. Nimeddi tin managa tohta magian gan tohta oga gitia gusto pigiskuin og ya betip mitmena ho. Imidatsig uskaya wistog tag kuimitmena ho upigiskuin o. Kakado mino o te watagan tohta magitsig yagun min nas kumog tatamskat na gisto. Wathortsig apin tohta magi ganos. Good day, ladies and gentlemen, elders, chief, counselors, knowledge keepers, and of course, survivors. It's truly an honor for me to be here today as a Lieutenant Governor of Saskatchewan, but also as a residential school survivor, second generation. To be here to listen, to learn, to acknowledge, and to share your pain. It's important that we have this opportunity to share the knowledge that exists, to write the history that's been written about this country of ours. And it's important to acknowledge the courage of those that are willing to stand up here and have in the past to share their stories, to inform us so that we know the truth. Because it's been said many times before, without the truth, there is no way forward. I stand here before you as a Lieutenant Governor, encourage everybody that's listening, not only in this room, but elsewhere, and all Canadians, to open your minds, to learn, to acknowledge the true past and history of this country of ours that we call Canada. With that, thank you. Thank you to the elders, to the leaders. Have a good day.
What happened in this process of brainwashing, genocide, is we were changed from a matriarchal society to a patriarchal society, which in itself was very destructive. And today the grandmothers are taking over, the women are taking over. And one of our leaders here in this community is Stella Kitchemonia. I'd like to ask her to say a few words.
And for sure, there are a few words. I'm not the speaker for long-winded speaker, but I welcome all of you, and I was happy to had the opportunity to sit by Ogimawakan and all the people that are here. Senator, it was really nice to listen to him. There was a lot to pick up from what he said. It's true, we don't know who all those people are. And I didn't look at the pictures of the school on the wall yet. Maybe I'll recognize some, I don't know. But this is very good opportunity for all of us to be here and to know what's happening to these people. Kerin gay minitan kawe dinas katoin. Nawats nda na kawe apich sa sagna sibuan. Patrining nina kawe kawin win sagna sim si. Gas tunuin Sagana Simon, Gikinama Ganisko. I'd like to acknowledge all the ones that are at the table. Ugimakan siko tugimaganiwan. Mingiwe siko piutek. Dinantawe ni Mark to feel welcome out here. God, we to feel strange with us or to feel strange that they are here. Sige go ukagi ito tabuat kamach tuat kego. Me tukngay kit pakan kego awyo katasindan asing ni pagego kita sindam o kita sindanawa kagi kikituat me migoch kinakabininim.
You'll notice and you have noticed that the language is being spoken both by fellow residential school survivors, but by myself also. We had all been brainwashed into believing that we had lost our languages. And we understand that sometimes we can't communicate with the young people with those languages, but it's important that we educate the public of how important they are in maintaining our survival. With that in mind, I'd like to turn it over to my friend Ted Strongquill.
Kuego, Kenina, Kinaganim Kunema, Piedekai, Ugima Kanak Maga Vindagagoing, Wege Chiogima, Bajuit, the Kanaga Kotagan, coming on the street. Oh, we have some lucky to get out, where Ma Hagi no ma Hagi Tenino, Kikiton and Yok, Gwege Anokiaganak, where Nantuk Kawichi Wingoma, Anin Manogum, Kinagego guys, Wabantamangom Manogum. Apache could no re-enter in the Manogum. Kiguma Gawita Sentamang. Oh, wait, Nisa Joe. Siguma kita Joe. Ogonai kanan kagim kikarte again, was mena limitina. Apinochiak. Janis na begani kita sa maogima. Kita na makananik. Kaya magino tamtasim to. Wege. Tamiko kagagi makanuet. Mi ma. Kaya sing ma ni sa Joe. Magi kita siyo ma kan kenta simen wenen anin kut no tay se no ke ko ta to tamang kiyo ni ken tawan ko weni sa siyo we ke kita siyo ma kam kon do kiyo ni ken tawan do o me o sa ni piyo kita pi asa kinati o ka me kon ke o chito na ana me o kan ma kon ke we o me ke te kon le ka sa ki pe ai sa o we Fort Pelly guy tameng ma kiet nong mi ma gaon chi ma gak mi ma anis ki ma mi no at anis na bek waps ki we ge me ko te kone kina mi ma ka be o na ma to ma we kina ti o ka me gon sigo na me o ka me gon na mi ma abino chiak mi ma ki sa ki na into ma kan sutte in skone ganan pigo skone ganan we Io skia in skone ganan anin kam sigia yas non mida sa sa asigi anok ki ok ge mi go e ka io ki ma wat ke we ti so wa panong no me se go no go ma ha e ki to an inin tap sko gano to et tamo go e ka ki no ni ken don to we ni sa jo me anis ka e ken ta simen uske baby sakita se ma oke mi ma in sionachin to mi ma na me se ko no go ma eni na je skituan ga no te tamo no go ma tamno ko na ko no le je chigan de ma we ni ben ga ben na go mi ma ke go go chigemen iga samana ni ani sna ge ni ken to me ga me te ga ga gi to at me osa was me yo Guta ka ki o ka ta sin taman me o so ek me me api ki pchen ko e ok me to ga ken tamat na me se ko no go ma kenin ga no te tamak ko e ka ko chi ke men ko ga ma ste mo na ni ga ki ka go e ka chi ke men ma ke gi no ent wa ga sin so te gen sko ni ga nan mi ma ke gi no ent tam ma Tui siang ito, ani sa snagi o ni kena to, ni ge, o benochiak, baby sak, uske ge, kitena we ma kanina ni ma, kagi asing isno, we ge kan tame ge ma kan wet ma, Keeseekoose mi o e sa nikate go e kitis ko ni kanina, mi o e, mi ma ge ising sing. Ha mi se ko, ha mi o e se ko ge ni na ma ka ben ha si gong ni pen mi ma mi na gata semana ni mi api. Tago ikchige kirage go ma tamena sema ma no gom abjiga se mena na go ma kina we ma no gom ka ma mu no go ma ke go ma ga we ta sin tamang ka ba mi ta sin tamang ma no gom we mai so ek me ka gi se kana op me go wing we kina ti go me go we mi we anis ni we te ka mi na ke si jige ke no te mi ma ge ni ma gi chi we mi ma ida so ke ni ma gikken dan we me ge ni ka yong bi ge ot mi ma ge no anis mi e we te anis ke pe kan ge no Manitoba ge no mi ete ge no anis to kan ge no da is ge o me te se pe si kon mi ge ga gi ni kan skamot we kana ti o ga me go we me ga te o kana mi ge ha mi ga si kan ma si kan op mi go ma si kan op mi go we have been ocean, Kagi Shona Jord, Kai Kitwat, Nami Masigo, Sigono Goma, come Kigate again, where I go Naganan, where Nisa Joe, Sigoma Ita Joe, we have been ocean. I'm Nami Magic Kenda, Gan Wees when Mar and I asked no, Dana, Midastam Kigate again, where near you can't amen when in Marminik was by St. Caswat. Mem to go see a man in that. Kinai na ki ma ni sa chu ha ndi no ma kan to ha me ko ge ji o ma ga ji ga no na go wa me ta se go ge ni ne jik skit to an go wit sta ma we ge ni na ma we ni jik shan sna ben sak ma ga ya at ke no go wit sit men we no gum ma ga wi sit ge go ma ga bi na go ha we go ik chi ge ha ndi no ma kan to kina kita na me ko ne ma ga e ha me go me ne ke to an
Our days are numbered. We all know we have more yesterdays than tomorrows. And out of the 150,000 people that accepted a common experience payment some years ago, the estimate is there's only 45,000 of us left. So when our people have this opportunity on such a historic day to express themselves in English and in their language, I ask all observers, all of our allies that are of non-Indigenous ancestry, stop and listen to yourself. An opportunity for all of us to learn, an opportunity for you to learn, and to not be controlled by that clock. If you have to go and you have another appointment, we'll see you later. This exercise we're going through is the importance of bearing witness to a historical event that's been put on the back burners for years and years and years. I know for me, all of my lifetime, and for many of you, because I know some of my buddies are in this room. So please keep that in mind if you're representing an agency. There's a time when that clock doesn't control you. We're now in a position where we control our own destinies. I'd like to call up my friend, fellow residential school survivor, knowledge keeper, Sarah Janelle.
Michinana katama kakwechimi kwan tapigi kitang kainin. I'm very thankful that I was asked to come and speak here today also. Kitan mi kun nimkina linoy makanitok biotek kina apinochiak no se sinanik. Tam ka matianam tuano kagi mam kaunda hagi mam kamwat waki kagi ayasigango pinochia kagi mega kinumati o kama kongi zaat maga ki anine to kagi aisya sewat kanda kenda jinga nanis mangya yasi tas untuk taga kanoya kagi gituat achikod nung dinentam higit magi ni min tinoy magan itok meninu kagi kinumati makamugong magagi sawat kina. Din sinabi anis kainin man don't say. Gitsini ni dinay makanak. I think a lot of my relatives, I feel for all of the people that went to school here. I didn't get an opportunity to go to school here because we weren't treaty at the time. And I guess now I am very thankful for that. Our mother didn't go to school, but our dad did. He went to Brandon, Manitoba, and he went there for 7-8 years, and he come home deaf. He married a lady from Cody, and she died. Then later he met our mother. And because his dad signed him off to reserve before they left, he was in treaty. And then when our parents got married, our mother lost her treaty rights. Kiyit nung ute nasin ayamin. Kikagimi wate to kungun anin kipi sawat ko ete kipi mkawa kitas ko. Kange gongi kenda sinya pi. Kagi sigite mainda. Gia pinochio keni nani siapi. We lived in a little town north here. It was called White Beach, north of Erin. And some of our relatives used to come running away. When they ran away from school, they came to our place. And they used to come and find them, the priest and the police or whoever came and found them. I didn't know anything at that time of how they were treated because I was a little kid also at that time. But I used to see my parents and grandparents, my uncles and aunties. Some of them would have a party or something and then they'd be crying. And that's the only time, a lot of times that I heard about what happened. Like I said, at that time, I didn't know. I was just a kid, but now that I grown up, I know what happened. And I know I didn't have anything to do with it, but I apologize to all of you. Ikentan sigo ganing gagi tuta ko ik. I know now what happened to you, and I'm very sorry, deeply sorry. I think of my kids, my grandchildren, my great grandchildren. When I read about those. Ted is my cousin. His dad and my mom were brother and sister. I'd like to thank everyone for being here, for supporting this. Thank you very much.
Anin, Indigenous Mary Culbertson, Musqueam. I'm from Keeseekoose, the Musqueam family. I'm the first woman treaty commissioner in Saskatchewan and the first Indigenous woman treaty commissioner. I'm the first lawyer from Keeseekoose, but I hope to not be the last. I'm very humbled to be asked to come home, to be here today with my mom, my spouse, and my family, my uncle, my cousins, and my aunties. It's a very somber day. You don't know whether to clap sometimes or sit there shaking because you hope to have the strength to be able to talk about these things. And growing up here, you know, you would hear the stories, right? Our oral history. You knew places you couldn't go play along where that teacherage used to be. Don't look outside at night because we were always scared of where that playground was and how you'd feel looking at it. Or walking someone home across the road from the teacherage to behind the rink and you'd hear a baby crying in the bush. Those horrible stories like that I remember when we were kids. I didn't go to residential school. My mom went. My kukum went. I miss Mrs. Father went where his name was changed. And that's how we have the name Musqua spelt in a French way. They changed our names. They took our languages. And our three nations here, our chief of Cody and their counselors and our neighbors at Keys and our relatives, our leadership is all sitting here. The graves in our three reserves are full of the consequences of these schools. And those graves keep getting filled. In my job, I have to teach about the treaties. And the one thing I always try to make sure people understand is that the residential schools were born from broken treaty promises. Those were breaches of treaty. Instead of getting a schoolhouse and a teacher on every reserve, we got residential schools because they were cheaper, because they could assimilate us. They could take our culture and our language. They took lives and didn't care. They called us savages. Today, we hold our children dear to our hearts. We wouldn't let anybody hurt them. And sometimes lots of us aren't capable of looking after our children because we inherited a legacy we didn't want to. And we see that evident in these communities with our addictions. Anybody can Google Kamsack, Keeseekoose, Cody, Key, and what they're going to find is about our opioid crisis. They're going to find out about our addictions, our high rates of death. All of that is directly from these residential schools. We have to bury our children. And that's not something our grandparents or our ancestors wanted when they entered into treaty. Our office does research, and we've been working with different dioceses and churches on getting research for some of the Treaty 10 schools, for St. Anthony's School. And sometimes we come up against barriers that are just unbelievable. And as a lawyer, I know those barriers are not legal. And it's still a struggle. So I'm glad Bishop Boland's here today because we have some talking to do later about one of those barriers we're coming up against. We have the only treaty archives in all of North America, maybe the entire world. And we get requests constantly for people looking for either their identity through their status, because that was taken away from them. We are the only people in this country who have numbers attached to us. Mine is 3670108201. We still have numbers. In what country and what world is that okay? And in having to sit between my people and the crown, it is a very difficult role. Like our Lieutenant Governor, or my friend Russ Marasti said, it's very hard to take that decision to take this role or not because you sit between your people and you're a representative of the Queen. But here we are today. We're two First Nations people who 150 years ago, and the people in our positions were the ones negotiating the treaties. It was lieutenant governors and commissioners negotiated these treaties. And we hope that today we can make those things right that the men before us did wrong. On behalf of my family, my home, my children, thank you for inviting us here today. My aunts, my uncles, I love you. My cousins, our elected leaders, our chiefs, we know how we're all related. I'm very sorry that we have to be together on this day. I hope to come home after the pandemic to have a celebration, not to mourn 54 graves. With that, miigwech. Thank you.
I want to ask all residential school survivors to please stand. We have asked the lead singer for the Soto Feather Singers to put down 5 drum beats, same as we do in our ceremonies, in your honor, in our honor, in honor of our schoolmates and our classmates that didn't make it home. Treaty Commissioner Culbertson, this is a lesson from you. Junior. Ladies and gentlemen, how about a nice round of applause for the forgotten people? Residential school survivors. Hi. Let's go now. I have a note here for Mr. Bill Cashane. His son brought me this. Mr. Cashane is 95 years old. He sends greetings today to all of you here. Recently, he's on the home stretch and he wanted to pass at home. So today he's at home and he sends along a message along with a story that if I have a chance, I will share it with you. But for those of you who are descendants and related to Mr. Bill Cashane, he's here with us in spirit, even though he's not here in body. I want to introduce the chief, not only as the chief of the FSIN, but also the son of the late Bobby Cameron, one of my classmates at St. Michael's School from 1958 to 1967. Chief Bobby Cameron.
Thank you, Eugene, and for emceeing and being a part of this journey for many, many decades. Amagwanes Noago Magantik, Nigan Mantu, Kanaskamun, Miogisagom Megwats, Egwa Kiteyak, Kitemno, Naskumtenoa, Epita Taros Pagana, Egagi Samuan, Egagi Samustmo. Kakyoe itagotig, ipik squeak, Nagatoke Oskayak, Chawsamsak, Awasasak, Nagatoke. We've traveled to many residential school sites, sat, listened, and learned from the survivors and their families. And some of the recommendations going forward is a couple of key things that we took away. And one of them is this: if they can spend X amount of dollars building these residential school sites, they can spend the same amount building healing and wellness centers right at those sites. They can bring those to justice who have harmed our children. That was an item, an action item. They can continue to help heal and restore that faith that many of the survivors are still waiting for. They can restore and return those records directly to the survivors, the descendants, the families, and communities where it rightfully belongs. So we can continue to put the pieces of the puzzle together. The Pope will have to and must apologize at a residential school site within our treaty territories. These are some of the recommendations we have heard, and of course there'll be others, but they're all important. You know, we would like to also say to each and every one of you for continuing your journey. Those children that have been discovered recently, and all those loved ones who left before, are looking down and saying, finally, they believe us. Finally, our people can have a proper burial in their own protocols and traditions. Be it the Anishinaabe or the Dene Sontline, or the Woodland Cree, the Swampy Cree, the Plains Cree. The Dakota, the Nakotas, and Lakotas, all of us are family. So it's important that we continue to support and stand with all survivors and their families moving forward. This has been our commitment from day one. It'll continue to be. Back in Muir East, we held this in the summer, and it was a place where my late dad had attended the residential schools. You see our survivors, the survivors, they give us gifts. In their own little way, they still manage to give us gifts. The gifts of oral teachings and oral stories. Those things can never be taken away from any government. Those things can never be taken away from anybody who wants to do harm to us, because it's here and it's here. We never forget. We always remember. This is what drives us as treaty people, as Indian people. Keeseekoose and surrounding communities, again, Ted Q, for your work you've done. Let's continue to walk this walk together. Those unborn that are coming up behind us depend on us to give them a better life, to give them a life where they're going to succeed, knowing that they're loved, they're happy, and they're not going to be abused in any way, shape, or form. Those are our words on behalf of the FSIN, our vice chiefs. Dutch Lara, who is also a survivor. Ali Bear, Heather Bear, and David Pratt, our veterans, our elders, our Women Council, Youth Council. I can honestly say this, we can honestly say this. We love each and every one of you. You guys are our friends, and we respect each and every one of you. Hi, fix it.
And now we have the tribal chief of the Yorkton Tribal Council, Isabel Osu.
I want to encourage all of our young people in the room and in our communities and our schools and everywhere. I want to encourage them to learn the history, their history of Canadian government and First Nation people. I encourage them to learn that that we don't forget, that Canada doesn't forget. And once we learn our history, then we get empowered. I think it brings us empowerment to know what our people have been through so that we don't have to carry shame anymore, and that we can be empowered by learning that this is the reason the way we are, that is not our own doing, and that we're survivors. It's great to hear when you say stand up survivors. It's great to see our survivors in our communities and that their children, we're all survivors. So I want to encourage our young people to learn your history.
Another young man I've seen grow up throughout his life. I'd like to ask him to make his way up here. He's the chief of the neighboring First Nation, and with Cody and Keeseekoose and Key, there's really no separation there in terms of families. And I'm so proud of this young man to now have been selected as a leader of the Cody First Nation. Chief Cody, George Cody. Hi.
Big wage. George Cody, Dishnikash, Wakan, Cody First Nation. Just like to acknowledge our pipe ceremony that I participated in this morning, that we just got today prepared for this time. And to acknowledge the drum group as well and the flags that are hanging and all the delegates that are here today right across Canada. Acknowledge the elders, the chief and his council, the survivors of Keeseekoose First Nation, and most importantly, the children that are sitting in front here that are representing the future of our generation. You know, I really appreciate my council and my elders and the survivors as well, and the children of our community, and also for Key First Nation. You know, we're the three communities that are here together. And St. Phillips Residential School had a lot of our own members as well coming to our neighboring community here. And, you know, to hear the stories that they've spoken, you know, it's heartbreaking to see how we were treated and still being treated today. In the spirit of the treaties that we signed with the Crown was supposed to have been a relationship with the Crown. You know, a treaty right to education wasn't the government giving the religious groups the money to establish these schools in our communities and taking our children away from our parents and our grandparents, which is having a generational effect as we speak today. The school that we're in now, this is a treaty right to education. Our kids get to go home. We don't have to worry about them dying in this school. You know, our mothers and our grandmothers from past generations, you know, I could not imagine the effect it had on them when their child did not come home. And I really appreciate all the work that's being done by Ted and his group here. And also, we are going to be doing a ground search at the Crow Stand Indian Residential School that was just east of Kamsack. A part of land that was a part of Cody First Nation, but it was surrendered. And I always say we never surrendered our children. You know, my mom doesn't even talk about residential school. I asked her once and she said, I'd just like to leave it behind. I don't want to see you guys going through that, she said. So we're all connected one way or another. And you can see the results of what it done to us, how it affected us in all ways of addictions, and how we are trying to heal as a nation and to bring our communities back into a place of restoration where we feel comfortable with our future, with our children, and the leadership sitting at the tables, along with the guidance of the elders, that we do move forward. And we thank you for the people that are helping us out at not only our level, but the Tribal Council level, the FSI level, and the AFN level, and the United Nations level. The world is starting to acknowledge what the Holocaust that we went through is, and the genocide. You know, I'm really encouraged by the stand that the people that are telling their story. You know how painful it must be, but you know, to release that anger and that bitterness in their hearts, to acknowledge, you know, they are a person as well. Every child matters. And that's what we always talk about. Every child matters. Not only today, but every day.
So my message is to Canadians across this country and everybody across the world. Listen to our story. These are real stories. These are real people. Think of your young ones. Think of your grandchildren. Think about how you kiss them every morning when you send them out to school. You'll see them again. But these children never were given that chance. These parents were never given that chance. So my message is to the world, listen. Let's give these families the respect that they deserve. Let's give these children the respect they deserve. Let them rest in peace. So with that, I'll just keep my words short, and I'd like to acknowledge everybody that's here, all the visitors that are here. It's really nice to see everybody coming out. So with that, could you make wage?
We're going to end off our program with a honor song to honor not only those who are in this room, but the people who we are commemorating, the missing children in these unmarked graves and the ones that never made it home. After that, we're going to have a victory song. And I had a discussion with the boys before.
Hey, bring that.
And they were having some problems with, do we do a victory song today? And I insisted that we do a victory song. The victory song is, we are here. We're resilient people. Everything was done to get rid of us. Everything continues to be done to control us. And we're no longer going to put up with it. And that's why we have to have this victory song in honor of those that have left us, in honor of those who are here in this room, but most importantly, in honor of our children and our grandchildren and our chapans, who we all hope doesn't have to live the lives we did with the childhoods lost. With that, Soto Feather, honor song. If you can rise, please do. victory song. As we close off this program today with this victory song, I want to encourage all of you to shake hands, give a fist pump, and if you feel comfortable in this time of COVID, give each other a hug, something we're not allowed to do in residential school. We encourage you to enjoy your meal, share each other's company, enjoy the room, enjoy the space. It is a safe space. To Chief Kitchemonia and his council, I just want to say, on behalf of my wife Laura and I, we are so honored to have been a part of this historic day. Kamsack. Today we're wearing orange t-shirts. We have this flag that's in front of this podium, and it says every child matters. That's not just a saying. Don't let it be just a saying that's used out there by charlatans and profiteers who are making money off the backs of our misery. This is a real statement. These 3 children you see up front, representing those that didn't make it home, their lives matter. We got to make sure that we don't get caught up in this just being a saying. This is for real. Every child matters. And right now, our children are being used as an economic driver in this province to keep the economy going. And that has to stop.